Most beginners think that they need 50,000, 100,000, or even more to buy a rental property. You don't. Let me show you the real numbers. You don't need $50,000 to buy your first property. Most beginners wait years because they think they need huge savings. But the truth is, people are buying their first property with just $8,000 to $15,000 using beginner-safe paths nobody explains properly. If you want to learn the simple roadmap beginners use to get started, I'm teaching it in a free workshop. Tap the link and save your spot. So the first thing is the down payment itself. Now, I asked this question recently to a bunch of people in their 20s, and they said, oh, it's 20%. Now, that might be true if you think about trying to avoid what is known as PMI, or private mortgage insurance. It's not typically. So in other words, if you get in with a Federal Housing Association, or FHA, that's just 3.5%. So that applies if you are owner-occupiers. If you're just trying to buy a property, you want to move in there, and you want to basically own it for a year, live in it for a year, and then after a year, you can always move after a year. As long as you go in there with the intent to live in it, then at least a year from now, or when you got in, you can decide you're going to move. Or it could be just your circumstances, maybe your job changes, you got to move locations, etc., etc. So that's one thing, the 3.5%. Now you can get conventional financing too, in some cases as low as 3%, but certainly 5%, 10%, you name it. And the difference is with the conventional financing, you don't have to pay MIP, mortgage insurance premium, because the MIP stays with it for the life of the loan. You can always refinance and sell it later, but again, the interest rates could change. But with the conventional, you can basically get rid of the PMI, the mortgage insurance. Because basically, when you're coming down with low down payments, it's a bit like a risky loan. So you're going to have to pay this mortgage insurance, either PMI or MIP. MIP comes with FHA, PMI is with conventional. So these are just kind of similar things. But with the FHA, it stays, that insurance stays for the life of the loan. So if you have a 30-year loan, it stays there forever, unless you decide to basically refinance. That's a way of getting out of it. But, you know, after with the PMI, after a few years, you can see, you know, according to the schedule, how long it takes to basically just come off naturally. Now, if you actually can rehab the property and significantly force the appreciation so that it's worth a lot more, especially if you go into a fixer-upper, then typically it might be the case, again, above a certain threshold, once you own that equity, a certain amount, as the percent that you own starts to basically go way more than the actual, or starts to rise relative to the actual debt. So that kind of loan to value ratio, if you will. So you're going to see that value. If you've increased the value, well, now instead of having only 3% of equity or 5% of equity, maybe you end up having 27% of equity because you've done a lot to the property now. The property is worth a lot more and you can get it reappraised, and that way you can get rid of the PMI. So the down payment, again, it doesn't have to be 20, 25%, even with the investment loans, the DSCR loans. So with the debt service coverage ratio loans, typically, right, this is an investment property, we think about 20% down. Now, it can be a little bit higher. Sometimes you have to put 25% down, especially in certain rural areas or very odd properties that are less likely to rent. Or you might have a lower credit score. Maybe you're like 580 or less than 680, and maybe there's certain other things. And of course, credit usually isn't what it's going to be assessed on with a DSCR loan. It's usually the building. But there can be other factors. It can be that the lenders are a little bit scared. They want 25% down or even more, right, in some rare instances. But typically it's 20%. Now, if you're thinking about a really good area, very good zip code, etc. You've got sterling credit like 740, etc. It can be 15%, as low as 15% in some amazing scenarios. And by the way, there's actually also a really high one. There's a 30% down for if you really have awful credit, or really the property is, there's something really wrong with the property, really odd, really aggressive, then it can be a 30%. Maybe your credit is 640, 650. Maybe it's, you know, it's in a declining or a rural area, then the down payment can be a bit larger. Now, with the DSCR loans, essentially what we're trying to do here is we're getting an investment loan for the DSCR. So for rental properties there, the debt service coverage ratio. So typically your net operating income, so your gross income, subtract some of the operating costs and also adjust for vacancies. So we're looking at the taxes, the insurance, the utilities, as well as the maintenance and the management. So with the DSCR, what we're looking here at is we're looking to make sure that your net operating income relative to the debt service is a certain ratio. So when you divide by the net operating income by the debt service, you get, let's say it's 1, 1.1, 1.2, or even it can be smaller. It really depends on, what your down payment is. So if your down payment, if you're kind of being saying, well, your kind of your income, your net operating income is really, really good relative to the debt, you might get away with a lower down, maybe even 15%. But if your debt service coverage ratio sucks, so if you have, maybe you're only hitting 3/4 of it, rather than 1.2. So if you're only hitting 3/4, you might have to put down more, 25%, even 30% in some rare circumstances. So what is this ratio? Well, on the top line, we're looking at net operating income. And here we're looking at your gross income or gross rent, but sometimes there's more income from certain things. Like again, if you're renting out the car park, if you have, for instance, coin-operated laundry, etc. So you also want to subtract from that things like the taxes, the insurance, utilities, maintenance, management, but also vacancies and homeowner association fees if you have any of those things. Now the utilities, by the way, it's only subtracting if you are paying the utilities as the landlord. Now, this is still not your cash flow because, you're having a loan, right? So you're going to have your principal and interest as well. So don't confuse that. Like your cash flow is going to be even tighter because you're going to be paying your principal and your interest. But the debt service cash ratio, it basically takes that NOI and then divides it by the actual debt service, the principal plus the interest for an entire year. So that top line is for an entire year. Again, your gross rent or gross income, subtracting these operating expenses and your vacancies. So all your things, your tax, your insurance, your utilities, if you pay them as a landlord, maintenance, management, repairs, things like that, management as well, and also any vacancies. So divide that by your debt service, which is your annual principal and interest, or your monthly times 12. That gets you your ratio. Around 1 is good. Above 1, you may even get down a low down payment, and a much lower than 1, you might actually have to, very, very few people will give you a loan at that point. Very few lenders will give you a loan. You might be putting up to 30%. So really depends on what you're doing. Again, I've just kind of shown that there are some cases where you can put down 15% with the DSCR loan. If you have a fantastic area, good zip code, good credit, although that usually doesn't come into it, but it could be your DSCR is so high, so you've got amazing net operating income, amazing kind of amount of money that you're making relative to the debt service, then it can be good, right? You could get away with a 15% down payment. But in terms of the other ones, the conventional and the FHA, look, you could even have 0% down if you're veteran or you're USDA, agriculture, rural, certain areas there. So there can be super areas. Like I love my kind of 3-5% down, 3 to 5% down conventionals, typically speaking. I've been putting down 5%, did 1% one time on a duplex. Now I'm putting down 5% on a current quadplex. So the closing costs, typically when you're buying a property, now I like to kind of double my low down. So if I'm putting down 5%, I kind of double that and I get a range of roughly what it's going to cost to close, to settle. So the range is usually around 1% to 5%, depends on the area, depends on what you're doing. That's a simple rule of thumb, 1% of the property all the way to 5% of the property price, right? You want to add that to the closing cost. It's not just your down payment, which is, let's say it's 5%, but it's also that range. So there's also inspection, appraisal, reserves, all that jazz. So with reserves, we're thinking about having around about 6 months of operating expenses. Now, by the way, the reserves that you're usually asked from the lender's perspective are 6 months. So we saw that 6,852, and really what we want to do with that 6,852 is multiply it by 6 to get what you really need from the lender's perspective. They just need to see that you have that in addition to basically closing and settling. They kind of want to see that liquid. It could be something like a Roth IRA or something else, but they will want to see, typically, and again, it can depend on the lender, but they will want to see something like 3 to 6 months, etc., of liquid reserves that are there that you can access somehow. Now, for conventional lenders, by the way, that's for the debt service lenders, but for conventional lenders, usually 2 to 3 months can work. Now, in terms of reserves, in terms of emergency, like what you feel comfortable with, this is a little bit kind of different because it depends on the kind of property. Like, are you looking at something like me? I'm doing a quadplex, and it really will vary depending on how comfortable you are with risk. On the extreme side, if you're really not comfortable with risk, you might want to have 6 months of your principal, interest, tax and insurance, any PMI. So that's your whole mortgage. So for me, take that 6,852, multiply it by 6, we're around about 40,000. That's kind of a biggest number you want to have in reserves for that one property. Now you might want to look at something a little bit easier than that. You could be like 300 to 500 per door. So around about 12 to 2,000 for a quadplex. That's what you kind of want per month. So that's kind of, on the lower side, right? That's a little bit scary, right, to run that low. So we're really talking 1,200 to 2,000 a month. That's not a lot. That's about 7,200 to about 12,000 as your entire emergency. Now that I feel comfortable at a lower area where I'm kind of like just trying to accumulate wealth. But when you're trying to preserve wealth, or if you want to really look at hedging your risks, which is definitely advisable, then you want to have a bit more. So that's where the 40,000 in this case comes from. But look, guys, this is a huge property, right? So my other properties where it's more like 2.4 for the actual PITI, etc. There's no PMI anymore. There, you're talking 12,000 is really fine for a lot of that. Now you want to look at the operating expenses and that'll become more realistic, but it's still not as much as this property because this is a whole different animal altogether. So, a kind of good rule for a beginner here is, take about 3 to 6 months of your mortgage payments, etc., and then add about 300 to 500 per month per door on top of that. As you get further along, you'll want to kind of have that. Now, it depends on how much you want to grow, etc. If you have a lot of properties, and again, you don't want to have a black swan, but it's unlikely that all of your properties happen at once. It can, and so I'm kind of saying, if you want to really insure yourself, be my guest. But, for me, I think of emergency funds kind of more broadly. Like if it was a true DSCR and a true kind of rental property, and I had it in an LLC, and I had, okay, here's a bank account, and I have all the 40,000 sitting in that bank account, or sitting in kind of maybe like a good high interest online savings account, something like that, something growing, or bonds, something like that. That's fine. That's good. It's liquid. It's easy to get to. But you see, this is the thing where I have so much in terms of the index funds. I've kind of grown my taxable, my Roth IRA, never have to really dip into the Roth IRA, but my taxable and other accounts that I don't have to worry about at this stage because my goal is to grow my wealth a little bit speedy. But I am looking at these things. I am kind of saying to myself, okay, what do I need? Now, I have had a lot of negative shocks, like Six Sigma events, so I'm aware of this. That's why I'm not growing too fast, right? I have a kind of comfort zone, right? I don't want to go below a certain level, a certain threshold. But that's where it's really up to you. I like to say the number 6. I think 6 months is fantastic. If you can do 6 months of operating costs, brilliant. Now, you could kind of expand those operating costs to look at maintenance, management, utilities, reserve, all that kind of stuff as well. That's fine. Or you can just think about, for me, I like looking at just PITI, if there's principal, if there's mortgage insurance, sure. But I think for me, given that I'll be getting rid of the mortgage insurance pretty quickly, I just like looking at the mortgage, except for the mortgage insurance, times 6. That is more than enough. And for this property, it's a big amount of money. But that's because it's a giant property, right? Guys, we got 4 units plus a 3-car garage. It's a lot. My other properties, they're more like 3,000 a month. Ish, 3. So having, 18, 20 grand for one, the other property is more like 2.5. So having around about kind of 12, 15, 18K is enough. So they're kind of more manageable. This being 40,000, it's a different kettle of fish, but there's a lot more that can go wrong, right? There's a lot more kitchens, more bathrooms, more renters, more things. And by the way, the appraisal, so you're going to pay for appraisal, and you saw the estimate $750. I ended up paying $775. So that was the appraisal for this property, $775. Now, it can be a little bit less. My one, hats off to the guy, whoever did it, because it really was something I was really impressed with because, it was hard to do it. It was a quadplex, a fourplex in an area that historically they don't have many. I think there's around 300-ish in the 4 counties that are anyway decent, right? And so that's There's not a lot, and that's counties. That's huge. In the area, very few. You'll find some duplexes and some triplexes, and you'll find some bigger multifamily, but that's no longer small multifamily. So it's very, very hard to do comparable analysis, comparable sales analysis, because then it's like, well, when was the last one sold? Well, typically it's within 6 months, within half a mile, but here they were looking probably within 2 years, within 2 miles, 3 miles, and good luck to them. They did a great job. But that was why I was on the higher side, like $775. I don't think you'd be paying $775 for usual appraisals, right, that are a bit easier to do. Now, in terms of inspections, so I got a lot of inspections. Now, I did some of the zoning, the deeds, the legal myself, so I personally reached out to the local township asking for violations, any history of violations. I wanted to get a certificate of occupancy, rental licenses, things like that. I wanted proof that the place was legal. I wanted to check the zoning code. It was an R40. What that meant was it was legally grandfathered as a non-conforming fourplex, so it wouldn't conform to present day standards, but it's so old it was there before code. It's a 1925 building, it's 100 years old, so it was done, it's always been like that. Then I was told as long as the rental licenses are active, it's all good. The next thing was, well, can you please furnish me copies of the rental licenses? So the township was really good. It's great when you're dealing with a good township. They're professional. They've got the right to know, like a civilian right to know forms, things like this. They were just wonderful, pleasant. That can make all the difference in your world. And you want to be good to them and be friendly with them and be respectful for them, and because there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I'm so happy with that township. It's such a good township. They take a genuine pride in terms of how they do their work. So I'm very, very happy. Early days, we'll see, but very, very good so far. So they were able to furnish me all the documents. Yeah, it is legal. You're not going to get into a nightmare situation that I got into my previous property, because you just don't want to take on the liability. So there's all that, right? There's all the kind of the legal, the zoning. Now, I also did a boundary survey, and I also wanted to get a graph. In another video, I talked about that. So I paid $1,642.75. So about $1,242.75 was for the boundary survey, and another $400 was for drawing up the map. Now, that $400 for drawing the map probably wasn't like for everybody. I love it because, although you can work straight away with what they do in terms of the pins, the ribbons, the bars, the stakes, whatever they put down. You can get, if you've got fencers that want to come in, do any work, you can see them, but they disappear over time, right? So you really want to have a drawing. That really helps you kind of see exactly where things are. It really makes it extra. So I paid the extra $400 and I paid the $1,200. Now, it would have been less. Now, they were there all day, one day, and partly the next day. Part of it was, well, he wanted to check a curb, and there was a primary or an elementary school, as you say, in the US, and they're waiting for the elementary kids to get off and to leave and all this kind of thing, and the yellow buses the school buses were there, so they couldn't do the work, and then the rain came down, some of the machines wouldn't work, and so they were brilliant. They were there from 8 in the morning to like about 2 in the day. I was there with them for 6 hours, and then they came back the next day. So it was a lot of work, even though it was a rectangle, easy plot, but it wasn't as easy as being in the country necessarily. So, hats off to them. It can be cheaper than that. Again, I paid $1,600. That was roughly $1,200 and $400. You could pay less than $1,000 for certain places for the boundary survey, because you don't want to discover that like your property, actually half your driveway is like on your neighbor's. It was just built like that way back when, and you could then get into an issue with your neighbor if your neighbor doesn't like you. That your neighbor could suddenly say, look, I don't want you parking your tire on my side of the line. You're like, well, how do I swing my door open because it's too close? I had that in my first property. Or it could be the case that you have, for instance, your garage is slightly over the line because it was built way back when, and you could get an issue with your neighbor. Your neighbor could be like, well, it's a nice garage you got there, but that garage is parked on my line. You got to move it. And it's like, well, you could get into issues like that. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting into anything weird. So I wanted to do a boundary survey during the due diligence process. Helps me sleep better at night. But in addition, the regular home inspection for pretty much everybody, I think it really reduces risk. So my home inspection was different because I had a fourplex. In my case, my company that does it, not my company that I own, but the company I employed, was $395 just for the base, okay, just the base example. But then you have to add, because it's a multi-family, add an extra $225 because there were 4 units. And then there was an extra $100 because it was a little bit larger. Kind of think he may have let me away with it, because what I saw with $100, I saw that's from around $19.99 or $2,000 to about $24.99 or $25. I was significantly bigger than that, so I think he was doing me a favor. So that just the basic inspection came to about $720. But for most of you, it's probably going to be closer to like $300-400, maybe $500 pushing it. I did have the radon test, and for me, it's like $110. Now you can get for about $15 to up to about $30. You can get that yourself, the kit yourself, and you can do it where you leave it usually in the basement and on the first floor. You want to close all the windows, everything. Don't disturb the house for 1 or 2 days. That can work sometimes, you know. When people are away, they're selling a single family. But in my case, the multifamily, one of the tenants didn't want to have to keep their windows closed, so we couldn't do a proper test for the radon. Still, it was $110, but if you do it yourself, you can just get the equipment and it's cheap. I'm going to do that, I think, once the tenants have moved out, and I'll just double check, because the radon, again, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. So you want to check that. In Pennsylvania, it's quite strong. So $110. Now, you can get, the reason you do that is you can get a remediating system for just a few $100, less than $1,000 usually, to actually solve it, right? To keep it at bay. So you want to know, is it a problem? So therefore you can get it to solve it. Now there's also kind of a termite inspection, kind of the wood infestation. So in my case, that was an extra $95. And you know, you can do this. This is fine. Like, it depends on where you are. You're going to kind of wet, you get dry, subterranean, etc. Depending on your west coast, you don't really get the subterranean there necessarily. You don't get the wet ones. Over here on the east coast, you do. They can be quite nasty. So we wanted to check with that. Nothing really, no sign whatsoever. So, you know, nice to pay. I like having a second pair of eyes. I didn't see any sign. Neither did the home inspector. But it was $95. That was an extra thing you can tick on the sale agreement, right? Where I wanted to do a termite wood infestation inspection. That was part of it. Radon is another thing that you can do. That was also that you can tick. So I kind of got them all under the same inspector. Now the radon meant that he had to come back a day or two later. So he put it down, then he came back a day or two later to take the machines. And because the windows weren't fully closed all the time, it meant that he would only really see if it was off the charts. It wouldn't be fully perfect. So I have to do it myself later on. That's what I want to do to figure it out. There's also a sewer scope. It was $175. That was what he charged me for doing the sewer scope. And it was really good in my case. So I should have done it probably in my first house. Didn't, and then I paid the price because it was like $22,000 to replace everything afterwards. Whereas this time I saw it was all brand new PEC. It was all lovely. So I was very happy with it. So the total cost for the inspections was $1,100, and that was for the home inspection, for the radon, and for the termite, as well as the sewer scope. Now, of course, you know, there's an extra $225 and $100 within that, so it comes under $1,000, probably closer to like just a little over $700, almost $800, if you weren't doing all that I was doing in terms of the fourplex. So my first property was closer to $700 for the same kind of overall idea, but just it was only one unit. It was close to $700. So I did pay the extra $1,242. That was for the boundary survey, and the extra $400 for the boundary map, but that's almost no one does that. I could have done an inspector from let's say an engineer report. I could have done more, but there was nothing that showed that was structural issues. I did some structural issues in my second property, so that's why I had an engineer report. And I don't want to scare you guys, but I hope it gives you an idea. Those few $100 or $1,000 you're paying, you know, makes sense. If you're just getting a single family, it could just be like $395, right? If you're just going in for that particular inspector, right? You could get other inspectors that are cheaper, etc. But those few $100, do not skip those if you can. Try to get those inspection contingencies, because learn from my mistakes, right? You want to get these inspections so that you know what are the problems. You're getting a full heart report. It's like getting a full body scan. You know everything wrong with the property almost, right? And that way you go in knowing what you can do. Now you can renegotiate. You can use that to go back to the seller, and you can ask the seller to fix some issues or give you a credit or reduce the price, etc. Or you can just not do that. But it'll help you either way, knowing or for negotiation. Some love getting the money back. Some like getting the thing solved. Others like me, we just like knowing. Right? I like knowledge. I like data. I can go in and I can go, okay, I could walk away if it's too expensive. My biggest fears were allayed. They were assuaged. They were calm. They were placated that day. I realized after the inspections, after the boundary report, after all of that, there's no wood infestation. Legal is good. boundary is good. Radon, it's not off the charts. I'll find more later. And the home inspection, beautiful. A few little things like a long list, but small things. Nothing major, niggly stuff, one or two moderate things, but nothing super expensive relative to my last place. So I just love doing that. I love numbers, I love data. Hope this particular part was useful for you. If this video is helping you understand this part of your financial journey, you'll get even more value from a free workshop I host for beginners. In this workshop, I walk you through a simple roadmap that shows how you can buy your first property with realistic savings and a lot less confusion. If you want to take everything you're learning on this channel and fit it into one clear plan, the link is in the description. It's completely free. So for me, going to have a look at an example here. So recently I'm closing on this Fourplex. So it's a conventional loan, about 30-year fixed rate loan. Now I'm paying down the interest rate. The interest rate would have been close to 7%, but I'm paying it down so I get close to 6%. How it works is you pay about 1% of the loan value extra to reduce by 1 point. So 2% of the loan value, if I pay that, it'll reduce it by 2 points. 1 point from my lender translates into a 0.375% interest rate reduction. So 2 points from my lender is actually a half a percentage plus that 0.375. So it's essentially 0.875% or almost 1%. That's why I'm down from almost 7 to about 6. So we're seeing it here in the sheet. The sales price, $925. By the way, this is not the final estimate. At time of recording, I'm about a week away from closing now, and I'm just waiting for my final closing cost estimate. I was asking for them the last day or two, but I was told that these are still provisional, and I can already see some line item issues. So $925 was the sales price we agreed to. The down payment, that's 5%, so that's the $46,250. That's my down payments. That's exactly the down payment for this property. Again, it's $925. The appraisal, what it's worth, mortgage, just came in at $925, so I'm paying only 5%. And that means that I have to get a loan of $875,750. So that's the mortgage amount. Now, it's not showing up there at the top, the actual MIP or the PMI, but there's, you really see the final loan there of the $878,750. Now, the appraisal even, I'm seeing it here at $750, but I had to pay $775, so it came in a little bit more expensive. There's certain line item changes, but it's minor. Credit report, $292, processing fee, $595, underwriting fee, $895, tax service fee, $85. And then the next item, this you don't have to pay. The $17,575, that's 2% roughly of the $878,750 that I'm basically borrowing. So I'm paying that, but I don't have to pay it. In fact, they could be paying that to me, and that could be a negative sign. In other words, I'm getting that cash. That might be good if I really wanted the cash for a rehab. That might be good if I'm, only keeping the property for just a short term. I mean, if I'm kind of trying to flip it in a year or 2 or 3. But for someone that's holding onto the property long term, usually the net present value NPV calculations usually suggests that it kind of pays you to pay down the loan. Right now, the interest rate environment is kind of moderate. It's no longer low, 3%, 2%. Now we're kind of in the 6 to 7% at the time of this. And this is the end of 2025, start of 2026. So at this point here, I felt it was worthwhile me personally paying down so I could lower the hurdle. I have a lower interest rate. I'm not too optimistic on interest rates coming down. They may come down at some point, but I didn't want to bet on them coming down. They would need to come down a good 1 to 2% before it makes sense. So, I kind of felt, what, I'm gonna pay it down. I got the cash to do that. I'm all right. That's not everyone's cup of tea, but for me, I'm gonna hold this property forever. So it's going to basically pay me back over years and years and years that I'm doing this because I'm paying less on interest and it's lower hurdle. And I really did want to qualify for it. I didn't really want to have too much, especially when I want to expand into another property and another property and another property. I didn't want to have a big debt to income ratio. I wanted to lower this debt. And this is the one time you get to do this, apart from if you're refinancing it later. But then you're going to encounter all these fees almost all over again. I didn't really want to do that. So these are just kind of some closing costs. Again, the processors, the loan originators, they got to make their money. The underwriters doing all the background stuff, the service things. These can change, like your kind of settlement title. They got a title insurance company just to make sure that, everything is legit, that the actual property is the owner. There's only one owner on the property, etc. There's not multiple owners. They're not written down. So they're doing a lot of background stuff. There's the lender's title insurance. There's the owner's title insurance. There's all kinds of things like that. The wire fees, overnight fees, note fees. This is all kind of office supplies kind of style thing, endorsement, CPL. These are things you could negotiate potentially with your lender, but you don't really want to kind of bash them down too much. Like some people suggest that you can negotiate, and you can, as a consumer, you can negotiate. I'm not saying don't. I'm saying, look, if you want to do that, if you want to be my guest, do. But I think that from point of view in terms of personal relations, I think they're better. I think that if you can get people to work with you because they like working with you, they like working for you, they're going to bat for you. They're going to do so much more because they're more loyal to you, etc. They're going to work hard. They're going to negotiate. They're going to really help you. When you're kind of just trying to beat them down over a $25 this and a $75 that, it's going to amortize anyway over 30 years to next to nothing. So I don't like trying to save too much money here. I like getting someone who is going to qualify me for the maximum possible loan, and he's going to make sure that I get the loan and going to really help me get in there, get the deal done. Rather than somebody, and it's going to, by the way, that someone can pick up the phone, can text me anytime, etc., like your brother, right? That's much better than, oh yeah, I got the lowest fee, but I'm on the phone for like an hour waiting for some bank like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, etc. I want a local lender for this reason. So I'm not kind of batting them down for this. Now, there's additional charges here, like for, RE Coke fees. There's also some government fees, recording fees, transfer fees. Yeah, transfer taxes. You got to pay them. They may suck, but you got to pay them. So all this stuff is there. It's kind of included in the estimates. So the prepaids, by the way, this is not too bad because the prepaids are actually stuff you're paying in advance. This is stuff like your insurance for an entire year for the property. The interest rate for 2 weeks, right? You're going to pay on a property where you're only putting a low down payment in. That's for 2 months. So you might say, well, Michael, I don't like paying. Why don't you just put down 20%? Well, because then I'd have to put down 4 times that number, right? So $46,250. That was my down payment. So I'd have to put down 4 times that. It is a lot more to have to save for than 46,000, right? You'd agree, right? So why not do this now? I will save the extra money, that 100 and whatever it is, right? I will save that extra money and just pay $200 a month. And by the way, that $200 a month will get wiped out if I can increase the value of the property sufficiently so that I now own a lot more. And you can do that with fixer-uppers by rehabbing cleverly. So that could be just something. In my last 2 properties, I didn't really pay after the first year or 2, right? So it's only a year or 2 paying like $100 or $200 a month. Okay, that's fantastic, right? You can get in faster. You want velocity, right? You want to get through faster, faster, faster. So that's how you do it. It's really good. It's called bank hacking. So again, you have your homeowner's insurance, you get real estate taxes as well. That's for 14 months. So I'm paying these prepaids, but that means I don't have to pay for the next while. So it's not really a sunk cost, like once off. This is going to be basically helping me for the next few months so that my monthlies are not going to be so high, if you will, for the next while. So that's excellent. Now, the total estimated funds to close here, I'm seeing my total estimated costs right now are $36,215. That's the closing costs. There are prepaids. So $36,000, yeah, that's way less than 5%. Right, so 19,578, almost 20,000, that's prepaid. So I'm actually paying something that I'd have to pay anyway if I owned the property over time. So that's kind of taking headache off me. And my 5% down is just 46. So yeah, right now it's around about 102,000. Now of that closing costs, around about 17,000, so that 36,000, half of that pretty much is in just buying down the interest rate, which you don't have to. So really it was only about 19,000 to basically close if I wasn't actually paying for the points in terms of the rates. So if I wasn't buying the points, it would be closer to 19,000. And then, of course, I'm just paying for the next 19,000 is really just like to actually have the property for a few months, if you will, right? To pay the first few months of the rent, of the tax, etc. So it's not really closing costs, if you will. It's different things. Prepaid, I'm paying it in advance. So my down payment's 46. Again, you could pay 19, so that'd be 46 plus 19. And the rest is really just stuff that like is your kind of your prepaids, your reserves. The first, so it's really just 100,000 in this case. So I could have paid 85, let's say 85,000 would be how much for me? 85,000 of that, there's 19, so about 65,000, right? So of that 65,000, the down payment is 46. And you could say the next 18, 19 is regular closing costs. And by the way, these numbers seem big, but don't forget, this is a Class A, really expensive neighborhood. I'm buying in $1 million, pretty much $925,000 fourplex, 4 units with a rental garage, 3-car garage. This is not your first property. This is not my first property. So don't look at this like, oh, he started this video, he said you don't need to have 50,000 or 100,000. Now he's showing me you have to have 100,000. This is not the first property that you do, right? If you divide those numbers by about 3, right, that's probably closer to, for some of you, your first property. Maybe divide by 2 for those that want to jump a few hurdles or go through a little bit more. Divide the number by 4. Now we're getting much more realistic, kind of average person first property, right? If you're doing this cleverly. So that's closer to 25 grand. Now, you can also get seller credits where the seller can give you some money back towards closing costs. So you could reduce that even further. And by the way, I put down 5%. You could put down 3.5%. So that $46,000 here, you could be shaving off thousands from that 46,000 if you put down 3.5% FHA or 3% conventional as well. So I could have gone, again, you can multiply that by, so close to 30-ish thousand rather than 46,000 for the down payments. That's for almost $1 million property, right? So if you kind of look at a property that's around $250,000, the numbers scale down. So again, you could have got in here for probably 10 to 20,000 if you didn't pay down the actual interest rate points. And again, some of this money is going to be spread out over time. So really, when I'm saying that extra money, the total prepaids, that's for a few months. So you really want to look at is the closing costs and the down payment. And the closing cost of the down payment there, we're seeing it's around about 80,000 for $1 million property. So 65,000 if you exclude the buying out. So again, 65, divide that by about 4, and we're left with around about 1,000. And you could get a few thousand off from the seller credits and a few thousand off from grants in your area, especially if you're a first-time buyer. So this is totally possible, guys. This is like showing you the real thing. Now, the estimated monthly payment, that's my principal and interest there, about 5 1/3, right, for the principal plus the interest. So some of this I'm actually paying to own the property. Feels good, I'm paying it down. And some of it, look, the interest I'm paying, I'm actually, because in this particular case, it's a fourplex, already the units are renting apart from my one. So already I can be claiming back some of the interest in tax write-offs, right? And the homeowner's insurance, $200, I'm going to get that wiped off as soon as I can show the appraisers that, like, look, I've done significant amount of work to improve the property. It should be coming down. And the mortgage insurance, right? That's your kind of the homeowner's insurance. Apologies, guys. The homeowner's insurance, I've said $200. That's an approximation. It's kind of a placeholder there. That's really the homeowner's insurance was for the actual insurance. The $278 here is for the mortgage insurance. Now that would be lower if I was putting down a bit more. It would be 0 if you put down 20% and above, but it would be even higher if I was putting down just 3% rather than 5%. So that's the 278.27 I'm really talking about. And that 278.27, that's what's going to be something I'm going to try to get rid of as soon as possible. So as soon as I can renovate it, or I watch the market and I pay it down for long enough and I can get it back, that's what I'm really looking to kind of eliminate. Everything we talk about here, saving, budgeting, investing, eventually leads to one question. How do I move from managing money to owning an asset that works for me? I am hosting a free beginner workshop where I break down one of the simplest paths anyone can use to get into their first income producing asset. No hype, no pressure, just clarity. If you want to see that roadmap, the link is in the description below. The real estate taxes, they are what they are. You know, there are some changes now in the taxes, whether you can deduct them or not deduct them, but you know, that's just life. That's kind of what you got to pay anyway, even if I had a mortgage, $1,000 a month. But look, this is a building right now that the rent alone, and that's not including my one. I'm living in there right now, rent free, right? I'm a house hacking. So the rent alone is $4,500. So I'll probably be on the hook for a little over $2,500. Well, my current rent is about $2,200. So I'm basically going into a place where I'm renting my unit for a little bit over $2,500. But part of that rent is actually principal pay down. So it's actually not like I'm just giving it away. I'm actually I'm owning more of my property, and I'm getting to write off the interest. And there's a lot of other things. The property is going up in value. I'm owning more of it. If I fix it up, I can increase the value even further. If tenants leave, etc., or over time, I can increase the rent. If, let's say, some of my plans come to fruition, eventually I move out, I can rent my unit. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, beautiful place. I could rent that out. It should just about cover the mortgage. The building should be renting for around about, as is, about 6, 7, but if I do anything to it properly, and I plan to, probably more like 8, 8.5. As a long-term rental. I will take that deal all day long as a long-term rental to rent it out at 8, 8.5. But as a medium-term rental, fully furnished, let's say 6 months, 7-month leases, etc., something like that, you're talking 12, 13,000 a month. Now, yeah, you're paying utilities, you're paying other things, but and I'm not doing short-term. Short-term is not allowed in the area for those that are doing short-term. Something's comparable. You'd be almost like 17, 18, 19, 20,000 a month. But who wants the headache? And I'm not doing anything illegal. It's totally legit by the book. So I made sure that the township, what they wanted, like I want to make sure that like I'm complying. I don't want to do this. So I'm going in kind of long-term, medium-term, that kind of hybrid. And right now it's purely long-term, and we're going to see how it works out. But again, 8.5 long-term, 12, 13 medium term, and you're seeing right there that is a very close, not the final thing, but 6,852, right? So again, I'm getting 4, 5, so I'm basically renting it for 3, 3. But right now, look, I'm actually having a 2-bed, 2-bath. I'm spending about $2,200 a month. So for $3,300, I get a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, but it's a bit bigger, it's a bit nicer, and I'm owning it. It's not like the 3-3 is just purely just going out. Like I'm actually paying principal pay down, and I'm getting interest, write-offs, and I'm getting other things as well. And I can get rid of, again, about 278 of this. So I can bring it close to 3, right, once I actually do that. And then that 3,000, of course, that can be lowered, especially when I eventually move a year or 2 years from now. Let's say I move, I can rent that out. Maybe I get 3,000 a month for that particular unit. Or I can basically also increase, because the number thing right now is that the other units are far, 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 far below market value. And some of them are coming towards the end of their leases, etc. So there could be some opportunity there for a bump in rents, and for rehab. There's a bunch of things that need to be done to the building. And so it's way under value in terms of the market value. So really this could be a great deal. I hope this is a kind of good idea of a quick calculation with a realistic budget, but you guys don't need a huge amount, right? If you want me to break this down for your particular situation, then sign up for the free live training below. Again, you don't have to do this all at once. You can do this one property at a time. So let's build your wealth one property at a time, and I'll see you in the next one.